He thought he owned every floor of that skyscraper. He thought no one in the building knew him, feared him, or dared to cross him. But one night, something appeared on his desk. Something small, ordinary, and impossible to ignore. The kind of thing that turns a powerful man's blood cold. Stay with this story till the end. Because the truth behind that something didn't just shake his company. It started with a woman the building refused to see or take notice of. The city had a way of swallowing people whole. Some it digested quickly, the homeless, the desperate, the forgotten. Others it kept in its belly for years, slowly breaking them down until nothing remained but shadow and sinew. Evelyn Cole had been living in that belly for 6 years now, scrubbing the insides of a glass tower that reached so high into the sky, it seemed to pierce heaven itself. She pushed her cart down the 42nd floor hallway at 2:47 a.m., the wheels squeaking in rhythm with her breathing. Her knees ached. They'd been aching for 3 years now, ever since she'd fallen on black ice outside the building and hadn't told anyone because she couldn't afford to miss a shift. Couldn't afford to be seen as weak. Couldn't afford to be seen at all. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a sterile white glow that made the marble floors look like frozen milk. She'd mopped these floors so many times, she knew every vein in the stone, every crack where the grout had begun to separate. She knew which tiles would show streaks no matter how carefully she cleaned them, and which corner by the elevators always collected dust no matter how often she swept. Victor Harrington's office sat at the end of the hall, a fortress of frosted glass and polished chrome. The door was always locked when she arrived, and she was grateful for that. It meant she could clean in peace, without his eyes cutting through her like she was something dirty that needed to be removed. She'd seen him, of course. Everyone had seen Victor Harrington. He was impossible to miss. 6'3", sharp-featured, with silver threading through his dark hair in a way that made him look distinguished rather than old. He wore suits that cost more than she made in 6 months, and he moved through the building like a king surveying his kingdom, never looking down, never looking back, never looking at all. But Evelyn had looked at him. She couldn't help it. She'd watched him for 6 years, observed him the way someone might observe a dangerous animal in a zoo. With caution, with curiosity, with a strange kind of sadness. Because she could see what others couldn't. She could see the way his shoulders tensed when he thought no one was watching. She could see the way his jaw clenched when someone laughed too loudly in the cafeteria. She could see the careful distance he maintained between himself and every other human being on the planet. Someone had hurt him once. Hurt him so badly that he'd built walls tall enough to block out the sun. She sprayed glass cleaner on the conference room windows and wiped in careful circles. Outside, the city sparkled like broken glass, scattered across a black velvet. Somewhere down there, in a small apartment in the Bronx, her grandson Malik was sleeping. Or she hoped he was sleeping. He'd had a fever yesterday, nothing serious but enough to worry her. Enough to make her want to finish early tonight and get home before he woke up. Malik was 12 years old and too smart for his own good. He asked questions Evelyn couldn't always answer, about his mother, about why they lived where they lived, about why Grandma's hands shook sometimes when she thought he wasn't looking. She'd raised him since he was 3, since the day her daughter Cheryl had died in a car accident that should never have happened, on a road that should have been repaved years ago, in a neighborhood that the city had forgotten existed. Evelyn hadn't forgotten how to exist. She'd just learned how to exist quietly. She moved to Victor's private bathroom and began scrubbing the sink. It was always spotless. He barely used it. But she cleaned it anyway, the way she cleaned everything, with the kind of attention to detail that most people reserved for things they cared about. She cared about doing her job well. It was all she had left to care about some days. The folder sat in her cart beneath the spare trash bags and the bottle of industrial cleaner that always leaked a little no matter how tightly she screwed the cap. She'd put it together over the last 4 months, carefully documenting everything she'd seen and heard. The late-night arguments between executives that she wasn't supposed to overhear. The emails left open on desks when people rushed out for lunch. The conversations that happened in elevators when people forgot she was there, standing in the corner with her mop as invisible as air. She debated whether to give it to him at all. What business did she have interfering in corporate matters? Who would believe a janitor over executives with law degrees and stock options? But something in her couldn't let it go. Couldn't let him walk into a trap without at least trying to warn him. Because despite everything, despite his coldness, despite his cruelty, despite the way he'd once walked past her when she'd slipped and fallen in the lobby without even breaking stride, she believed there was something decent buried underneath all that ice. Something worth saving. Maybe she was a fool. Cheryl used to tell her she had too much faith in people. "Mama," she'd say, "not everyone deserves your kindness." But Evelyn couldn't help it. It was who she was. It was who she'd always been. She finished the bathroom and moved back into the main office. His desk was immaculate, everything arranged at perfect right angles. A photograph sat in a silver frame. A young woman with dark hair and Victor's same sharp features. His daughter, maybe? Or his sister? Evelyn had never seen her in the building. Had never seen anyone visit Victor, actually. He seemed to exist in a vacuum, untouched and untouching. She dusted the frame carefully and set it back exactly where it had been. The clock on the wall read 3:15 a.m. If she hurried, she could catch the 4:30 bus and be home by 5. She could make Malik breakfast before he woke up, make sure he took his medicine, make sure he knew he was loved. She pushed her cart back toward the service elevator and pressed the button. Nothing happened. She pressed it again. Still nothing. A handwritten sign had been taped to the doors. Out of order until further notice. Evelyn's heart sank. The service elevator was how she moved between floors, how she transported her equipment, how she stayed out of sight and out of mind. Without it, she'd have to use the main elevators, which meant potentially running into security, or worse, into one of the executives who worked late and didn't like being reminded that someone had to clean up after them. But Malik was sick. Malik needed her. She looked at the clock again. Victor never came in before 6 a.m. His private elevator, the one that ran directly to the executive floor, would be empty now. She could use it just this once, just to get the supplies to the top floor, and then she'd take the stairs back down. No one would ever know. She wheeled her cart to the private elevator and swiped her master keycard. The doors opened with a soft chime that sounded too loud in the empty hallway. She pushed the cart inside and pressed the button for the 45th floor. The elevator rose smoothly, silently. She watched the numbers climb on the digital display and thought about Malik's smile. About the way he'd hugged her yesterday when she'd come home from her day job. She cleaned houses during the day, 6 days a week, before coming here at night. About the way he'd said, "I love you, Grandma," without her even asking, as if he could sense she needed to hear it. The elevator slowed. The 45th floor. The doors began to open. And then she saw him. Victor Harrington stood in the hallway, briefcase in hand, his face carved from granite. He stared at her. And for a moment, neither of them moved. Time seemed to crystallize around that single instant. Her in her faded uniform, with her cart full of cleaning supplies, him in his $1,000 suit, with his perfectly knotted tie. His eyes were blue. She'd never been close enough to notice before. Blue like winter ice, cold enough to burn. "What?" he said, his voice so quiet it was almost a whisper. "Are you doing?" Evelyn's mouth went dry. "The service elevator is... I don't care about the service elevator." He stepped forward, and she instinctively stepped back, bumping her cart against the elevator wall. Something inside it rattled. "This is my private elevator. Mine. Do you understand what private means?" "Yes, sir. I just needed to—" "You needed to what? Steal something? Go through my files? Plant something in my office?" His voice was rising now, each word sharp enough to cut. "Do you have any idea how much I pay for security in this building? And here you are, waltzing into my personal space like you own the place. Sir, I would never—" "You would never what? Overstep?" "Because that's exactly what you're doing. You're overstepping so far, you're about to step yourself right out of a job." The words hit her like a physical blow. She gripped the handle of her cart to steady herself. "Please, my grandson is sick. I just needed to finish early tonight. The service elevator is broken, and I don't care about your grandson." Each word was a nail in a coffin. "I don't care about your excuses. I don't care about whatever sob story you're about to tell me. Do you know how many people work in this building? Do you know how many of them have sick relatives and broken down cars and problems they think justify breaking the rules? I wasn't breaking. You were in my elevator. That's breaking the rules. That's grounds for immediate termination." He pulled out his phone. "Security? I need someone on the 45th floor immediately." Evelyn's vision blurred. Not from tears, she wouldn't give him that, but from sheer exhaustion, from the weight of 6 years spent being invisible suddenly colliding with being seen in the worst possible way. "Mr. Harrington, please. I have worked here for 6 years. I have never been late, never called in sick, never. And in 6 years, you should have learned your place." He looked at her the way someone might look at a stain on expensive upholstery. "But apparently, you haven't. So let me make it clear for you. You're fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. But my grandson is not my problem." He turned away from her as if she'd already ceased to exist. "Get her out of my sight." 2 security guards arrived, young men she recognized from her nightly rounds. Marcus and John. She'd left them cookies during Christmas, had asked about Marcus's new baby, had helped John study for his GED exam by letting him use the copy machine after hours. They wouldn't meet her eyes now. "Ma'am," Marcus said softly, "you need to come with us." She wanted to scream, wanted to grab Victor Harrington by his perfect tie and shake him until he understood what he was doing, until he saw her as something more than an inconvenience. But she was 58 years old and tired down to her bones, and screaming had never solved anything in her entire life. So she nodded, straightened her shoulders, and let them escort her out like she'd committed a crime instead of just trying to get home to her sick grandson. They walked past the offices she'd cleaned for 6 years, past the conference room where she'd once found a young intern crying after being berated by her supervisor, where Evelyn had sat with her for 20 minutes, listening, offering the only comfort she had, presence. Past the break room where she'd left encouraging notes on the bulletin board, anonymous little reminders that someone out there believed in the people who worked here. The elevator ride down was silent. Marcus kept clearing his throat like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. John stared at his shoes. When they reached the lobby, Marcus finally spoke. "Miss Cole, I'm sorry. I tried to tell him, it's okay, baby." The word came out automatically, the way it always did when she saw someone hurting. "You did what you had to do." "It's not right," John said suddenly, his voice cracking with anger. "You're the kindest person in this whole damn building, and he just—" "Language," Evelyn said gently, and despite everything, she smiled. "Your mama would wash your mouth out." They helped her collect her personal items from her locker in the basement. A spare pair of shoes, a framed photo of Malik, a small Bible her mother had given her 50 years ago. Everything fit in a plastic grocery bag. 6 years of her life, condensed into something she could carry in one hand. As she walked toward the exit, she remembered the folder. It was still in her cart, still sitting in the elevator where she'd left it. She turned back toward the security desk. "There's something I left upstairs, in my cart. A manila folder. Could someone—" "We'll take care of it," Marcus said quickly. "We'll make sure it gets where it needs to go." She nodded, too tired to explain, too defeated to care anymore. The night air hit her like cold water. It was 4:15 a.m., and the streets were empty except for the occasional taxi and the homeless people sleeping in doorways covered in cardboard and newspaper. She walked to the bus stop and sat on the bench, her plastic grocery bag in her lap, and finally allowed herself to cry. Not loud, sobbing tears, just quiet ones that ran down her face and dripped onto her uniform, darkening the blue fabric until it looked black in the streetlight. She'd been fired. After 6 years of showing up on time, of doing her job better than it needed to be done, of caring about a building and the people in it more than they'd ever cared about her, she'd been fired for trying to get home to her grandson. If you think this is unfair, click like, because sometimes the world doesn't just step on the little people, it crushes them. The bus came at 4:45. She climbed on, swiped her card, and found a seat in the back. Through the window, she could see Harrington Tower still lit up like a beacon, all glass and steel and cold white light. And somewhere in that tower, in a cart in an elevator, was a folder that might save Victor Harrington from himself, if he ever bothered to look. Victor Harrington walked back to his office, his jaw clenched so tight, his teeth ached. He didn't know why he was so angry. The janitor, he didn't even know her name, had been in his elevator. That was a violation. That was unacceptable. He'd done what any CEO would do, what any leader should do. So why did his hand shake as he unlocked his office door? He threw his briefcase onto his desk and loosened his tie. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that looked fake, like someone had photoshopped beauty onto something fundamentally ugly. He hated sunrise, hated the false promise of it. Every new day was just another version of the old one, full of people wanting things from him, expecting things, demanding his time and his money and his attention. He sat at his desk and opened his laptop, preparing to review the quarterly reports before the board meeting at 8 a.m. But he couldn't concentrate. He kept seeing her face, the janitor's face, when he'd told her he didn't care about her grandson. The way her expression had gone blank, like she'd shut down every emotion just to survive the moment. He'd seen that expression before, on another woman's face, a long time ago. He shook his head, trying to dislodge the memory, and noticed something on his desk that hadn't been there before. His cleaning cart sat in the corner. Security must have brought it up, and scattered across his desk were its contents: spray bottles, trash bags, rags, and a manila folder, slightly worn at the edges, with neat handwriting across the front. "For you, please read." He stared at it for a long moment. Then he reached out and flipped it open. Inside were pages and pages of notes, all in the same careful handwriting. Dates, times, names, conversations, financial discrepancies, test results that didn't match what had been reported to the FDA, employees being forced to work off the clock, harassment complaints that had been buried, evidence of fraud, theft, abuse, a rotting foundation underneath the gleaming tower he'd built. His senior vice president of operations, Richard Chen, was embezzling funds through fake vendor contracts. His head of clinical trials, Dr. Sandra Morrison, was falsifying safety data on their new pharmaceutical line. His CFO, James Rutledge, was cooking the books to inflate stock prices before his planned retirement. It was all there, meticulously documented, witnessed, proven. And at the bottom of the folder, on a page by itself, was a handwritten letter. "Mr. Harrington, I know this isn't my place. I'm just a janitor, and you probably don't even know I exist. But I've worked in this building for 6 years, And I've seen things that I don't think you know about. Things that could destroy everything you've built. I've watched you for a long time, and I know what people say about you. They say you're cold. They say you're cruel. They say you don't care about anyone but yourself. But I don't think that's true. I think someone hurt you so deeply that you stopped seeing people. I think it's somewhere inside you still care. You just don't know how to show it anymore. These people in your company are betraying you. They're stealing from you, lying to you, putting your entire business at risk. But more than that, they're hurting innocent people. Employees who are too scared to speak up. Patients who will take unsafe medicine. Investors who trust you. I thought you should know. I hope you'll do the right thing. I hope one day you see again. Evelyn Cole Victor read the letter 3 times. Then he read the entire folder again, checking dates against his calendar, cross-referencing names with his employee directory, matching up the documented conversations with meetings he remembered attending. It was all real, all accurate, all catastrophically damaging. And the janitor, Evelyn, had been trying to protect him. The janitor he'd just fired. The janitor whose name he'd just learned. He stood up so quickly his chair rolled backward and hit the window. His stomach churned with something that felt like nausea, but burned hotter. Something he hadn't felt in so long, he'd almost forgotten the shape of it. Guilt. He walked to his computer and pulled up the building's security footage. Found the archive. Started scrolling through weeks of overnight recordings, watching the empty hallways and dark offices. And then he saw her. Evelyn Cole. Moving through the building like a ghost, cleaning, straightening, making everything perfect for the people who would arrive in the morning and never notice her work. He watched her comfort a crying intern in the break room, watched her leave her own lunch for a security guard who'd forgotten his, watched her tape encouraging notes to desks where she thought no one would see them. He watched her limp, watched her pause to lean against walls when the hallway was empty, when she thought no one could see her pain, watched her stretch her back and wince, watched her exhaustion, and he watched the way other people treated her, executives who let doors slam in her face, employees who left their trash on the floor even though she'd just cleaned, a VP who'd knocked her cart over with his briefcase and kept walking without apologizing. Another executive who told her to hurry up when she was cleaning the bathroom while he washed his hands, like she was an inconvenience rather than a person. Through it all, she smiled. She nodded. She said, "Yes, sir, and no problem, and have a good night." She endured. Victor sat back in his chair, the folder still open in front of him, and pressed his palms against his eyes until he saw spots. What had he done? What kind of man had he become? He knew the answer. He'd become his father. The thought hit him like a punch to the throat. His father, Malcolm Harrington, the original founder of Harrington Biotech, who treated employees like numbers on a spreadsheet, who'd believed that showing weakness was worse than showing cruelty, who told Victor when he was 8 years old, "People will take everything from you if you let them. Never let them." His father, who died alone in a hospital room while Victor sat in a board meeting, too busy to visit, too hardened to care. Victor had spent his entire adult life proving he wasn't his father. And in the process, he'd become exactly like him. He picked up his phone and called security. "Marcus, the woman you escorted out earlier, Evelyn Cole, I need her home address." There was a pause. "Sir, I don't think..." "That wasn't a question." "Yes, sir." He hung up and stared at the folder again, at Evelyn's careful handwriting, at the evidence she'd compiled to save him from people he'd trusted, at the letter that had seen through his armor to the wounded thing underneath. "I hope one day you see again." He was seeing now, and what he saw made him hate himself. Evelyn unlocked the door to her apartment at 5:30 a.m. and found Malik asleep on the couch, wrapped in the quilt she'd made from Cheryl's old clothes. The TV was still on, playing some early morning infomercial about cookware that could do everything except cook itself. She turned it off and stood there for a moment, just watching her grandson breathe. He looked so much like Cheryl. Same dark eyes, same long eyelashes, same stubborn set to his jaw, even in sleep. 12 years old, and already carrying more weight than any child should have to carry. She touched his forehead, still warm, but not burning. The fever was breaking. "Grandma?" His voice was thick with sleep. "I'm here, baby. Go back to sleep. You're home early." He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Why are you home early?" She couldn't tell him. Not yet. Not while he was sick. Not while she was still trying to process it herself. So she smiled. She'd gotten very good at smiling when she wanted to scream, and said, "They finished early tonight. How are you feeling?" "Better." He studied her face with those two old eyes. "You're lying." "Malik, you always touch your necklace when you lie. Mama used to do it too." He pointed at her hand, which had unconsciously gone to the small gold cross at her throat. "What happened?" She sat down on the couch beside him and pulled him into a hug, breathing in the smell of his hair, coconut shampoo, and the lemon candy he loved. "I lost my job." She felt him stiffen against her. "What? How? You never miss work." "You never—" "I used the wrong elevator." She laughed, and it came out bitter. "After 6 years, I used the wrong elevator, and that was enough." "That's not fair." "No, it's not." "We'll be okay though, right?" His voice was small, scared. "You still have the day job. We'll be okay." Evelyn did the math in her head. The day job paid minimum wage and gave her 30 hours a week if she was lucky. The night job at Harrington Tower had been paying double that with a shift differential. Without it, they'd be short $1,400 a month. The rent was $1,200. Food was $300. Utilities were $150. Malik's asthma medication was $80. They would not be okay, but she smiled again and held him tighter. "We'll figure it out. We always do." He didn't say anything, just held on to her like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting underneath his feet. 3 days later, Evelyn's landlord called. "Mrs. Cole, this is Frank Delgado. I'm calling about your rent." She closed her eyes. She'd known this call was coming, had been dreading it since the moment she'd walked out of Harrington Tower. "Mr. Delgado, I know I'm late. I'll have it by the end of the week, I promise." "Actually, that's not why I'm calling. Your rent was paid yesterday, the whole month, in cash." Evelyn's eyes snapped open. "What? By who?" "Anonymous donor. Someone dropped an envelope through my mail slot with your apartment number and enough cash to cover this month and next month." "I thought you'd want to know." Her stomach twisted. "Mr. Delgado, I didn't ask anyone to do that. I don't want—" "Hey, I don't care who paid it as long as it's paid. I'm just letting you know you're current." He paused. "Though between you and me, Mrs. Cole, be careful. Anonymous donors usually want something in return." He hung up, and Evelyn stood in her tiny kitchen, holding the phone, her heart racing. Victor Harrington. It had to be. Who else would know where she lived? Who else would have reason to try to buy her silence? Except she had nothing to be silent about. She'd already given him the folder. She'd already done what she could to help him. She didn't want his money, didn't want his guilt, didn't want anything from him except to be left alone. She called her landlord back. "Mr. Delgado, I need you to return that money." "What? Lady, are you crazy?" "I don't want it. Please, return it to whoever gave it to you." "I don't know who gave it to me." "It was anonymous. And even if I did know, I'm not giving back cash. That's insane." "But I didn't." "Look, Mrs. Cole, I don't know what's going on with you, but the rent is paid. If you want to throw money away, that's your business, but I'm keeping mine." He hung up again. Evelyn sank into a chair at the kitchen table, her hands shaking. This wasn't right. Taking charity from the man who destroyed her life wasn't justice. It was humiliation wrapped in $100 bills. 2 days later, groceries appeared on her doorstep. 6 bags full of food, expensive brands she'd never buy for herself. Malik found them when he came home from school. "Grandma, did you order groceries?" She came to the door and stared at the bags like they were full of snakes. "No." "Then where did they—" Understanding crossed his face. "Someone's helping us?" "Someone thinks they're helping us." She started carrying the bags inside, her jaw clenched. "But they're not. How is food not helping? We need food. We need dignity more." She started pulling items out. Steaks, fresh vegetables, name-brand cereal, things they couldn't afford and hadn't asked for. "This isn't help, baby. This is pity, and I won't accept it." "Grandma, that's crazy. If someone wants to give us food, we should take it. You always taught me to be grateful." "I taught you to be grateful for kindness, not for guilt." She picked up the phone and called information. "I need the main number for Harrington Biotech." Malik stared at her. "What are you doing?" "Returning a gift." She waited for the receptionist to answer. "Yes, I need to speak to Victor Harrington. Tell him it's Evelyn Cole, and tell him to stop." "Ma'am, Mr. Harrington doesn't take unsolicited calls. If you'd like to leave a—" Evelyn hung up and sat down hard in her chair. Her hands were shaking. Everything was shaking. "Grandma?" Malik's voice was small. "Are you okay?" No, she wasn't okay. She was 58 years old and jobless and running out of options. And now the man who'd fired her was trying to assuage his guilt by throwing money at her like she was a problem that could be solved with cash. Only someone with compassion would subscribe at this point, because this woman is fighting to keep her dignity while the world tries to take everything else. That night, Evelyn dreamed about Cheryl. In the dream, her daughter was 7 years old again, sitting at the kitchen table in their old apartment, the one they'd lived in before Gerald died, before everything fell apart. Cheryl was doing homework, her tongue sticking out in concentration, and Evelyn was making dinner. Spaghetti, Cheryl's favorite. "Mama," dream Cheryl said, without looking up, "why do people hurt each other?" "I don't know, baby." "But you're a grown-up. Grown-ups are supposed to know everything." "We pretend we do. But really, we're just as confused as children. We're just better at hiding it." Cheryl looked up then, and her face was older, the face she'd had at 25, right before the accident. "You can't save everyone, Mama. You can't fix the world. I can try." "And what happens when trying breaks you?" Evelyn woke up with tears on her face and Malik standing in her doorway. "You were crying in your sleep," he said softly. She sat up and wiped her eyes. "Come here." He climbed into bed beside her. Too big for this now, but still small enough to fit against her side. "I'm scared, Grandma." "I know. What if we can't pay rent next month? What if we have to move? What if—" "Shh," she kissed the top of his head. "We'll figure it out." "But how?" She didn't have an answer, just held him until he fell asleep, and then lay awake watching the ceiling and wondering when the bottom would finally give way. Victor couldn't sleep. He'd been trying for 3 hours, lying in his penthouse apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows and its view of the city that had once made him feel like a god. Now it just made him feel small. The folder sat on his nightstand. He'd read it so many times he could recite passages from memory. Evelyn's handwriting had become familiar, almost comforting, like a voice speaking directly to him through the darkness. "I think someone hurt you so deeply that you stopped seeing people." His ex-wife had said something similar the day she left him. "You're not a person anymore, Victor. You're just a machine that makes money. And I can't live with a machine." That had been 8 years ago. He hadn't tried to stop her, hadn't even tried to argue, because she was right. He'd stopped being human the day his daughter died. Emma, 7 years old, leukemia, the best doctors in the world, the most expensive treatments, everything money could buy, and it hadn't mattered. She'd slipped away from him while he held her hand and begged God for a miracle that never came. After that, feeling anything had seemed pointless, dangerous, like leaving yourself open to a wound that would never heal. So he'd shut down, built walls, turned himself into the kind of man who could fire a janitor without blinking, who could crush employees and competitors with equal indifference, who could look at human suffering and feel nothing. Until now. Now he felt everything, and it was destroying him. He'd tried to help Evelyn, tried to fix what he'd broken. But she'd rejected the rent payment. His assistant had called to say the landlord reported she wanted it returned. She'd rejected the groceries. They were still sitting on her doorstep according to the delivery driver. She didn't want his money, didn't want his help. She wanted justice, and he didn't know how to give her that. He got out of bed and walked to his home office, pulled up his computer, started searching for Evelyn Cole on social media, trying to find some way to reach her, some way to explain. What he found instead made his blood run cold. There were posts from social services, a case number, an investigation triggered by an anonymous report of child neglect. A 12-year-old boy living with an unemployed grandmother who couldn't provide adequate care. Victor had made that call. 3 days ago, drunk on guilt and desperation, convinced that maybe Malik would be better off in foster care, where he could get proper food and medical care and everything Evelyn couldn't provide. He hadn't thought about what it would mean for Evelyn, hadn't considered that taking away her grandson might destroy the last thing keeping her alive. He'd tried to help, and instead, he'd made everything worse. His phone rang. It was 2 a.m. Nobody called at 2 a.m. unless something was wrong. Mr. Harrington? It was Marcus from security. I'm calling because... Look, sir, I don't know if I should be telling you this, but Mrs. Cole's grandson is missing. Victor's world tilted. What? Malik Cole. 12 years old? He left school yesterday afternoon and never came home. Mrs. Cole has been looking for him for 16 hours. The police won't do anything yet. Say he probably just ran away. Give it 48 hours. But sir, I thought you should know. Why would he run away? Marcus hesitated. Because social services came to their apartment. Because they were asking questions about Mrs. Cole's ability to care for him. Because he heard them talking about foster care. Victor couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Where is Evelyn now? Searching. She's been walking the streets all night. Find her. Tell her... He stopped. What could he possibly say? What words could undo this? Tell her I'm looking too. He hung up and grabbed his coat, grabbed his keys, ran for the elevator without thinking, without planning, just knowing that somewhere out there a child was missing because of him, and a woman was breaking apart because of him. And if he didn't fix this, he would never be able to look at himself in the mirror again. The city at 2 a.m. was a different place than the city at noon. Darker, meaner, full of shadows that moved in ways shadows shouldn't move. Victor drove through the Bronx, through neighborhoods he'd never visited, despite living in New York for 40 years, searching faces, looking for a 12-year-old boy he'd never met. He found Evelyn at 4:30 a.m., sitting on a bench in a small park, her face hollow with exhaustion and terror. She looked up when he approached, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then she said, voice flat, "Go away. Evelyn, go away, or I swear to God I will scream until someone calls the police. I want to help." She laughed, and it sounded like something breaking. "Help? You want to help? You've done enough. You fired me. You sent money I didn't want. You sent food I didn't ask for. And then," her voice cracked, "then you called social services on me. You tried to take my grandson away. You thought what? That he'd be better off without me? That some stranger in a foster home would love him more than I do? That poverty makes me a bad grandmother?" She stood up, and even though she was a full foot shorter than him, Victor felt like she was towering over him. "You don't get to decide that. You don't get to play God with our lives just because you feel guilty." "Where is he?" Victor asked quietly. "I don't know." The words came out as a sob. "I don't know where my baby is." He heard those social workers talking, and he ran. "And now I don't know if he's cold or hungry or scared or—" She couldn't finish, just wrapped her arms around herself and stood there shaking. "I'll find him. You've done enough. Evelyn, please, let me—" "You break everything you touch." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and her eyes were full of something worse than hatred. Pity. "I felt sorry for you. I thought underneath all that ice was someone worth saving, but I was wrong. You're just broken, Mr. Harrington. Broken beyond repair. And the tragedy is that you break everyone else while you're at it." The words hit him like bullets. Each one finding a target, each one true. "I lost my daughter," he said suddenly. The words came out before he could stop them. 8 years ago. Leukemia. She was 7 years old. And I thought if I could just stop feeling, stop caring, stop seeing people as anything other than obstacles or assets, then I'd never hurt like that again. Evelyn stared at him. "But you were right. Someone hurt me, and I let that hurt turn me into a monster. I let it make me cruel. I let it make me blind." He swallowed hard. "Emma, my daughter, she would have hated who I've become. She would have been ashamed of me." "I'm sorry for your loss," Evelyn said quietly. "But grief doesn't excuse cruelty. My daughter died too, in a car accident when Malik was 3, and it almost destroyed me. But I had a choice. I could let it make me bitter, or I could let it teach me that every moment matters, that every person matters. That love is the only thing we take with us when we go. I made the wrong choice." "Yes, you did." She sat back down on the bench, suddenly looking older than her years. "And now a little boy is out there somewhere, scared and alone, because you couldn't see past your own guilt long enough to realize that helping people isn't about making yourself feel better. It's about seeing what they actually need." Victor sat down beside her, keeping a careful distance. "What do you need?" "I need my grandson, home safe. That's all. That's everything." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Victor pulled out his phone and made a call. "Who are you calling?" "Everyone." He waited for the answer. "Marcus, I need you to mobilize every security guard in the building. Off duty, on duty, I don't care. I need them searching for Malik Cole. 12 years old, African American, about 4'8", last seen wearing a blue jacket and jeans. I want every park, every subway station, every place a scared kid might hide. And I'm offering a $10,000 reward to whoever finds him safely." He made another call. "This is Victor Harrington. I need to speak to the police commissioner. I don't care if it's 4 a.m. Wake him up." He waited. "Commissioner? I need every available unit searching for a missing child, Malik Cole. I'm sending you his photo now. Yes, I know the protocol. I'm asking you to override it. This is an emergency." He made 5 more calls. To his driver, telling him to search the downtown area. To his assistant, telling her to contact local homeless shelters and youth centers. To the head of his IT department, telling him to hack into, access, the city's traffic cameras to look for a boy matching Malik's description. Evelyn watched him with an expression he couldn't read. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked. "Because you're right. I break everything I touch. But maybe I can fix one thing before I break it completely. You can't fix this with money and phone calls." "I know, but it's all I have." He looked at her. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I'm so sorry. Not just for this. For everything. For not seeing you. For treating you like you were invisible. For firing you when you were just trying to get home to him. For being the kind of man who could look at human suffering and feel nothing. I don't want your apology. I know, but I'm giving it anyway." He stood up. "I'm going to keep looking. You should go home in case he comes back. I can't just sit there. Then come with me. She hesitated, then stood up and followed him to his car. They drove through the city as dawn broke, searching faces, showing Malik's photo to night shift workers and early morning commuters. Victor had never paid attention to this part of the city before. The people who kept it running while everyone else slept. The janitors and security guards and taxi drivers and nurses. The invisible ones. He likes trains, Evelyn said suddenly. When he was little, Cheryl used to take him to the railway museum. He'd spend hours just watching them. Victor turned the car toward the old rail yard on the west side, an abandoned area that the city had been meaning to redevelop for years, but never had the budget for. It was dangerous, rusty metal and broken glass, and places a person could get hurt. But it was also the kind of place a kid might go if he wanted to disappear. They found him in an old caboose, curled up on a torn vinyl seat, shivering in his thin jacket. "Malik!" Evelyn was out of the car before Victor had fully stopped, running across the broken concrete and pulling herself up into the train car with strength that shouldn't have been possible for a woman her age. "Oh, baby, oh, thank God, thank God." She wrapped him in her arms, and Malik started crying. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I'm so sorry. I just didn't want them to take me away. I didn't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden. You're my whole world. Don't you ever think that. Don't you ever—" She pulled back to look at him, touching his face like she needed to make sure he was real. "Are you hurt?" "Just cold." Victor stood at the entrance to the caboose watching them, feeling like an intruder in a moment too private for his eyes. This was love. Real. Messy. Imperfect love. The kind his money couldn't buy. The kind he'd forgotten existed. Evelyn looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd fired her, there was something other than anger in her eyes. Not forgiveness, not quite. But maybe the possibility of it, somewhere down the line. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I didn't do anything. You knew where to look. But you listened when I told you." Victor drove them home as the sun fully rose, painting the city in shades of gold and amber. Malik fell asleep in the back seat, his head on his grandmother's shoulder. Evelyn stared out the window, one hand stroking Malik's hair, the other gripping the door handle like she still wasn't sure this was real. When they reached her building, Victor helped her get Malik upstairs. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, barely bigger than closets, a kitchen with outdated appliances, a living room that served as dining room and family room and everything else. But it was clean. Spotless, actually. The kind of clean that only came from someone who took pride in their space even when they had nothing else to take pride in. Evelyn put Malik to bed and came back to the living room where Victor stood awkwardly by the door. "I should go," he said. "Yes. I'm sorry. I know I keep saying it, but I don't know what else to say." "Then stop saying it. Sorry is just a word. It doesn't change anything." "What would change things?" She looked at him for a long moment. Time. Distance. A life where you're not in it. She softened slightly. "I know you lost your daughter. I know you're in pain. But Mr. Harrington, your pain doesn't give you the right to hurt other people. And until you understand that, really understand it, all the apologies in the world won't matter. What if I tried to give you your job back? I wouldn't take it. I can't work for someone I don't trust. Then what can I do?" "Nothing." She opened the door. "You can do nothing. You can leave us alone. You can let us heal from what you've done. That's the only thing I want from you." Victor nodded slowly, started to leave, then turned back. "The folder you gave me, the evidence, I'm going to act on it. I'm going to expose the executives who've been stealing and lying. I'm going to clean house even if it destroys the company, because you were right. They're hurting people, and I can't let that continue." "Good." She met his eyes. "Maybe you can't fix what you broke with me, but you can stop breaking other people." He left, and Evelyn closed the door behind him and leaned against it, exhausted beyond measure. Through the thin walls, She could hear Malik's breathing, steady and safe. He was home. That was all that mattered. But she also heard the landlord's TV next door, heard the couple upstairs arguing about money, heard the sirens in the street below. The world kept spinning, full of people struggling and suffering and trying to survive. And somewhere in that world was a broken billionaire who just started to see again. She didn't know if that mattered, didn't know if one man learning empathy could make any difference in a world so full of cruelty. But maybe it was a start. The story broke 3 weeks later. Harrington Biotech scandal. CEO exposes massive fraud in own company. Victor had called a press conference and laid it all out. Every piece of evidence from Evelyn's folder. Every name, every date, every stolen dollar. He'd exposed his senior executives, his CFO, his head of clinical trials. He'd called for immediate investigations. He'd offered his own resignation pending the board's decision. And then he told the truth about where the information came from. A janitor named Evelyn Cole documented all of this. She worked in our building for 6 years, and she saw what I was too blind to see. She tried to warn me. She tried to protect the company, protect our employees, protect our patients. And I fired her for it. I fired her because she used the wrong elevator. Because she was just trying to get home to her sick grandson, and I was too cruel to care. The media erupted. Social media exploded. Within hours, Diber's justice for Evelyn was trending. People were calling for Victor's head, for the executive's arrests, for a complete overhaul of corporate accountability. But they were also turning Evelyn into a hero, a martyr, a symbol of everything wrong with the system. Evelyn watched it all on her TV, her hands shaking, while Malik sat beside her in stunned silence. "Grandma, you're famous." "I didn't want to be famous. I just wanted to do the right thing." Her phone started ringing. Reporters, lawyers, advocacy groups. Everyone wanted her story. Everyone wanted to interview her, to put her on TV, to make her the face of workers' rights and whistleblower protections and the nobility of the working class. She turned off her phone. "Aren't you going to answer?" Malik asked. "No, but they want to help. They want a story, baby. That's different than helping." 2 days later, there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find Marcus from security standing in the hallway, looking uncomfortable in civilian clothes. "Mrs. Cole, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's something you need to know." "What?" "The executives that Mr. Harrington exposed, they're fighting back. They're claiming the evidence was fabricated. They're saying you stole documents and made everything up because you were angry about being fired. They're pressing charges against you." Evelyn felt the floor tilt underneath her. "What?" "They're saying you committed corporate espionage, that you had access to sensitive information and used it to frame them. The police are saying they have to investigate." "But I didn't steal anything. I just wrote down what I saw." "I know, but they have expensive lawyers. And you—" He stopped, looking miserable. "They're coming to arrest you tomorrow morning. I thought you should know, so you could prepare." After he left, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table and tried to breathe. Tried to think. But all she could think was that she'd tried to do the right thing, and now she was going to lose everything. Her freedom, her grandson, her life. Would you forgive him? Tell us in the comments, because this woman gave everything to save a man who destroyed her, and now she's paying the price. That night, Malik couldn't sleep. He kept coming into her room, asking questions she couldn't answer. "Will they take you away?" "I don't know." "Baby, what will happen to me?" "Your Aunt Gloria will take care of you." Her sister, who lived in Baltimore, who'd offered to take Malik before, but Evelyn had refused, too proud to admit she couldn't handle it alone. "I don't want Aunt Gloria. I want you." "I know." She pulled him close. "I know." At 6:01 a.m., the police arrived. 2 detectives, polite but firm, with handcuffs and a warrant. They read her rights while Malik screamed from his bedroom, held back by a social worker who'd come with them. "Grandma! Grandma, no!" "It's okay, baby. It's going to be okay. I love you. Remember that. I love you." They led her down the stairs in handcuffs, past neighbors who stared and whispered, past the landlord who looked away, past the street where she'd walked 1,000 times, where she'd carried groceries and pushed Malik in a stroller when he was little, and lived a quiet, invisible life. She wasn't invisible anymore. Now everyone saw her, but not as a person, as a criminal, as a problem, as another poor black woman who'd stepped out of line and needed to be put back in her place. The police station was cold and full of fluorescent lights that hurt her eyes. They processed her, took her fingerprints, took her photo, put her in a cell with 3 other women who looked as tired and beaten down as she felt. One of them, a young girl who couldn't have been more than 20, asked, "What are you in for? Trying to do the right thing?" The girl laughed. "Yeah, that'll get you every time." Evelyn sat on the hard bench and closed her eyes. Prayed. Not for herself, she was past that, but for Malik. For his safety, his future, his ability to grow up and still believe in goodness despite everything the world was showing him about how it treated people like them. Hours passed. She lost track of time, lost track of everything except the pain in her knees and the ache in her chest and the memory of Malik's face as they dragged her away. And then someone said her name. "Evelyn Cole?" She looked up. A guard stood at the cell door. "You're being released." "What?" "Charges dropped. Someone posted bail and the DA's office decided not to prosecute. You're free to go." Evelyn walked out of the cell on shaking legs, not understanding, not daring to hope. They returned her personal belongings, her wallet, her phone, her keys, her mother's Bible. And then they led her to the waiting area. Victor Harrington sat in a plastic chair, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He stood when he saw her. "Before you say anything, before you tell me to leave you alone, please just listen. You bailed me out." "No, I didn't." He pulled out his phone and showed her a news article. "The public did. After those executives tried to frame you, people started a GoFundMe. It raised $2.5 million in 6 hours. The DA dropped the charges because there was so much public pressure. They had no choice. And the executives?" He swallowed hard. "They've all been arrested. Real arrests, real charges. Fraud, embezzlement, falsifying medical records. They're going away for a long time." Evelyn stared at the phone, at the article, at the comments from thousands of people she'd never meet who'd stood up for her when she couldn't stand up for herself. "There's more," Victor said quietly. "I stepped down as CEO. The board accepted my resignation. But before I left, I made sure some things were put in place." He pulled out an envelope and handed it to her. "This is yours, whether you want it or not." She opened it. Inside was a check for $2.5 million, the exact amount from the GoFundMe. "I can't take this. You already have it. The money was raised for you. People wanted to help you. Let them. But, Evelyn, I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back the dignity I took. I can't erase the trauma I caused. But I can step back. I can leave you alone, like you asked. I can let you heal." He met her eyes. "I'm leaving New York, moving to North Carolina. I bought a small house near the coast. I'm going to try to figure out how to be human again, how to see people, how to care." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to know that you changed me. Not because you set out to. Not because you were trying to fix me, but because you saw me, really saw me, when I couldn't see myself. And that mattered." He turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, and Emma would have liked you. She would have thought you were brave." He walked away, and Evelyn watched him go, holding the envelope, her mind spinning. She went home to find Malik waiting on the stoop, his eyes red from crying. He ran to her, and she caught him, held him, breathed him in. "I thought they were keeping you," he sobbed. "No, baby, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." They went inside and Evelyn made him hot chocolate the way she used to when he was little. They sat together on the couch, and she told him everything. About the money, about the charges being dropped, about Victor leaving. "So what are we going to do?" Malik asked. Evelyn looked at the check sitting on the table. 2.5 million. Enough to change their lives. Enough to pay for Malik's college, to buy a house, to never worry about rent or food or medical bills again. But also, blood money, guilt money, money earned from suffering. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but we'll figure it out together." Evelyn didn't cash the check for 3 months. It sat on her kitchen table while she went back to cleaning houses, while Malik went back to school, while they slowly rebuilt their life from the rubble. She didn't want to need it, didn't want to admit that sometimes survival meant accepting help from places you'd rather not. But then Malik got sick again, really sick. Pneumonia that wouldn't respond to normal antibiotics. 3 days in the hospital. Bills that ate through her savings in hours. She cashed the check, used it to pay the medical bills, used it to buy a small house in a better neighborhood with better schools, used it to set up a college fund for Malik, used it to finally fix her knees, surgery she'd been putting off for 5 years. And she used some of it to start a foundation. Not a big flashy one with galas and board members, just a simple fund that paid for medical expenses and school supplies and rent when people fell short. A fund that helped invisible people stay afloat. She called it the Cheryl Cole Memorial Fund after her daughter, because Cheryl had believed in helping people too. News outlets wanted to interview her. She declined. Social media wanted her to share her story. She refused. She didn't want to be a symbol or a martyr or a lesson. She just wanted to live. Malik thrived. He joined the robotics club at his new school, started building things, little machines that could clean or help or make life easier for people who needed it. He had his mother's intelligence and his grandmother's heart, and Evelyn watched him grow with a pride that sometimes made her chest ache. She thought about Victor sometimes. Wondered if he'd found what he was looking for in North Carolina. Wondered if he'd learned to see people. Wondered if change was really possible for someone who'd spent so long being cruel. She didn't reach out. That chapter was closed. But 2 years after he left New York, a package arrived at her door. Inside was a simple wooden box with a note on top. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm not asking for it. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying. Every day, I'm trying to be better, to see people, to help without hurting. It's harder than I thought it would be. But you were right. Love is the only thing that matters. Thank you for showing me how to see again." Inside the box was a photograph. Victor standing in front of a small community center, smiling, actually smiling, surrounded by a group of teenagers. The sign above the door read, "Emma's Place, a safe space for youth in crisis." And beneath the photo was a handwritten note from someone else. "Dear Mrs. Cole, my name is Sarah. I'm 16. I was homeless 6 months ago, sleeping in parks and bus stations. Mr. Harrington found me and brought me to this center he started. He doesn't run it. He says he's not qualified, but he funds it. He visits every week. He listens to us." Really listens. He told me about you, about how you saved him by seeing him when no one else did. I wanted to say thank you, because by saving him, you kind of saved me too. I hope that's okay. Sarah Evelyn read the letter 3 times. Then she carefully put everything back in the box and set it on her shelf, and next to the photo of Cheryl and the Bible her mother had given her. Maybe redemption wasn't impossible. Maybe people could change. Maybe even broken things could be put back together if someone cared enough to try. But more importantly, maybe the small things mattered most. Not the grand gestures, or the foundations, or the public apologies, but the quiet moments, the listening, the seeing, The simple act of recognizing that every person, visible or invisible, mattered. If you stand for justice, don't scroll without reacting, because this is what real change looks like. Not perfect, not flashy, just one person at a time learning to see. 5 years after the scandal, Malik graduated high school at the top of his class. He'd been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship to study mechanical engineering. The night before he left for college, he showed Evelyn what he'd been working on for the past year. It was a small robot, about the size of a vacuum cleaner, with delicate arms and sophisticated sensors. It could clean, organize, lift, help. It was beautiful in its simplicity. "What are you going to call it?" Evelyn asked. Malik smiled and pointed to the nameplate he'd engraved on the side. "It's for every person who works in the shadows," he said. "Every janitor, every cleaner, every invisible worker who keeps the world running while everyone else takes credit. I'm going to mass produce it and sell it at cost. No profit, just help." Evelyn couldn't speak, could only pull him into a hug and hold him while tears ran down her face. "You raised me to see people, Grandma, to know that everyone matters. I'm just trying to live up to that." The next morning, she drove him to the airport, watched him walk through security with his backpack and his dreams and his good heart. And she thought about the journey that had led them here, through pain and injustice and cruelty, but also through resilience and love and the stubborn refusal to let the world make them bitter. She thought about Victor too, wondered if he was still running his center in North Carolina, still trying to help without hurting, still learning to see. She hoped he was, not for her sake, but for his own, because everyone deserved a chance at redemption. Everyone deserved a chance to be seen. Even billionaires, even janitors, even broken people trying to figure out how to be whole again. Evelyn drove home through the city that had once felt like a belly trying to digest her, but she wasn't being digested anymore. She was here, visible, alive, and she'd raised a young man who would go out into the world and make it better, one small gesture at a time. No galas, no foundations bearing her name, no speeches or awards or recognition, just pure quiet, dignity, just justice, just love. And in the end, that was more than enough. 10 years later, on a cold November evening, an elderly woman sat in a small Brooklyn coffee shop reading a book about robotics her grandson had written. Around her, people rushed past the windows, hunched into their coats, faces glued to their phones. Inside, cups clinked, milk steam hissed, orders were shouted and forgotten. Most people didn't notice her. One person did. A young barista, maybe 19, came over with a fresh cup of tea Evelyn hadn't ordered. "On the house," the girl said. "You look like you could use something warm." Evelyn smiled. "Thank you, sweetheart. That's very kind." The girl hesitated. "My mom was a janitor," she blurted. "She worked nights. People acted like she was part of the furniture. She used to tell me, the worst thing in the world isn't being poor, it's being invisible." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Your mother was a wise woman." "Yeah." The girl glanced at the robotics book. "She'd have loved that you're reading your grandson's work in public, like it's the most normal thing in the world." "She'd be right," Evelyn said softly. "It is." The girl smiled and went back to the counter. Evelyn wrapped her hands around the warm cup and looked out at the city. Once, it had felt like a beast trying to digest her. Now it was just a place full of people. Some kind, some cruel, all carrying battles no one could see. Somewhere in Massachusetts, Malik was in a lab, building machines that would make life easier for people like his grandmother. Somewhere in North Carolina, a graying man might be locking up a youth center for the night, listening to teenagers argue about music and dreams instead of earnings and mergers. Somewhere, everywhere, invisible workers were cleaning offices, watching security cameras, serving coffee, pushing carts through quiet hallways. Evelyn Cole, who had spent most of her life as one of them, turned another page of her grandson's book. She wasn't famous. She wasn't rich. There were no plaques with her name on them. But a billionaire had learned to see because of her. A company had been forced to change because of her. A boy had grown into a man who built things in her honor. And she had never stopped being human, even when the world tried to erase her. If you made it this far, then you've seen how pride can bury love and how truth never stays silent forever. But tell me, if you were behind that camera, would you have kept quiet or pressed play? Comment your answer below, because how you respond says more about who you are than you think. And wherever you're watching from, remember, justice might take time, but it always finds light.